I'm going to start this video in a little different way than what I'm usually doing. I'm going to tell you a story. Imagine you're in your bed, all by yourself. There's no one else in your house or your apartment. There's just the furnitures that have been standing in the same spot that have always been standing at. And the objects on those furnitures all scattered around. There's no order in there at all. Just pure chaos. Your apartment is completely dim. You know, what the hell do you need a light for? You're so well known with that apartment. You can find your way around it without any light. You're so used to it because that apartment has become your whole reality, your whole world. What exists outside of those windows, it doesn't matter, right? It's just you and this place. That's your life. Now, imagine there's an air raid happening outside those windows in that external reality you so hardly try to ignore. And if you live in specific areas of the world at the moment, perhaps this scenario of an air raid is not that hard to imagine. You know, imagine those rockets flying by, the sound of the sirens, people screaming. You know, and you're supposed to go to the shelter to hide yourself from imminent death that is coming your way. But you don't care. You'd just rather stay in your bed. You can't bother to move out of your bed. You can't bother to go to the fridge to get that beer or to get something to eat. You'd rather piss your pants and go to the toilet because you just don't care. So why the hell should you care about the air raid happening right outside there? Well, if a bomb strikes your house, who cares? So be it. You just don't have the energy to care. You might as well die. That person, that was me. And, well, perhaps the air raid wasn't happening. No one was attacking Norway at that time. But if it actually did happen, I wouldn't care. I'd rather stay in my bed. And in some way, I would see it as a salvation from my own misery. And part of that misery I've experienced, perhaps not all of it, but some part of it had to do with loneliness. I felt lonely, but by isolating myself from society, I ended up being even more lonely than before, feeling more of that. I amplified those feelings by isolating myself. I became a hermit of sorts. It's funny, in a way, how we can attempt to combine this loneliness with the need of being alone if you're miserable, or perhaps not even miserable, but perhaps you're just fed up with society, you're fed up with people, which is completely understandable. But even then, that doesn't stop you from feeling lonely. You know, I see a lot of those videos on the internet when someone would make those really honest and genuine videos about feeling lonely, or those videos of people who have no friends, or those videos of people who have never had anyone kissing them in the 30-something years of their life, you know? And it's sad, to be honest.
I'm like really alone, like I'm really fucking lonely. Like to a devastating extent. Like I'm such a loner, like it's just my whole life. That's all I'm used to, is being by myself. And I want to connect to someone. To me, like the thought of being close to someone almost seems like a faraway dream.
I am 25 and I have no friends.
The second people started doing stuff on the weekends, I was always alone in my dorm room watching all the other kids walk to the parties. I've never had a friend that I would just spend time with and tell everything to.
The moral, or what it all comes down to, is that I'm 21 years old and I have no friends. No friends at all. And might I add that my relationship with my family is non-existent. So I have no support system, no friends, nobody to turn to, nobody to hang around with, nobody to do fun stuff with, nobody to vent to, nobody to count on, nobody's there for me.
It is safe to say that we are experiencing probably the biggest loneliness pandemic in human history that the world has ever seen. And it's not a new issue either. I think it has been developing for years, and if we continue going down that path, it will only get worse. What exactly is causing this spike in loneliness? And I think it's a multi-layered issue, and we should treat it as such. I don't think there is just one cause to that. It's a pretty complicated problem we are facing. And I think it especially gets very interesting when we're talking about the loneliness of men who are experiencing it much more than women. That is not to say that women can't experience loneliness. And while a lot of the loneliness pandemic content has been focusing specifically on the loneliness of men, I wish to focus on the loneliness women can experience as well. We could say that loneliness is primarily an urban pandemic. People who are living in big cities are more likely to live alone and feel lonely. But I don't think it is an issue exclusive to urban areas. I grew up in a small town where I was different from everyone else around me. If you want to hear more about that, my very first video I've made was about my detransition story and how this experience of growing up in a small town affected me and made me transition to a female. I think this feeling of being different than the people around you is definitely what's contributing to the feeling of loneliness. But I don't think that is specific to this particular era we're living in. I think that is something that has always been happening. We are first and foremost tribal animals, but we're also flock animals. And we tend to kick out, people who might feel like they don't really fit in, or that they might be slowing down your flock, which is completely reasonable. We have been doing that since we were cavemen. To fit in is essential for your survival. If you're not fitting in, you're on your own. And that's just the dark truth of how we are, how we operate as humans, as human animals.
And I guess I'm trying to get away from all this shit, but you can't. It's impossible. You have to be around people, yet people fucking suck. People don't care about you. If you're a little weird or you're a little awkward, people fucking hate you. They don't want to be around you. And they don't care about any of your issues or how you feel whatsoever. That's the truth.
So I think it would be foolish to think that this in and of itself is the problem why people are experiencing more loneliness today. Because while loneliness might mostly be exclusive to that group of people, it is spreading among a wider range of different types of people than ever before. Of course, there's cases like, what if someone loses their spouse and spends the last 10, 20 years of their life all by themselves? Your parents are no longer around, your loved one is dead, you're on your own. What do you do now? It's a lonely life, right? In this video, I wish to focus on 4 primary areas which I think are contributing to loneliness. And those include friendship, dating, communication, as well as family life. And at the end of this video, I wish to not only talk about what I think is causing loneliness, but what should you do if you decide to give up on your social life, on people, or maybe on society as a whole. Where do you go from there? Starting with friendships or platonic relationships, I think men are experiencing a lack of friends more than women, for that very simple reason that women are more social by their nature, so they are less likely to feel lonely. I think women also feel more miserable when they're on their own. They have a stronger desire to be around other people, whereas it is more common for men to be lone wolves. But lone wolves can experience loneliness too. Women, on the other hand, are more likely to be susceptible to social contagion of cultural norms, ideas, subcultures, and mental illness as well. In the last video I've made, I've mentioned briefly how, you know, we see physical illness as something that is spreading socially. You know, you may cough or sneeze in my direction and I might get sick, but we somehow view our psychological health as something completely isolated, as a bubble of sorts, and we don't realize that our mental health is affected by the people around us as well, and mental illness can spread on social level. In 2019, Daily Mail reported that 1 in 5 men have no close friendships in their lives. And mind you, that was before the pandemic, right? That happened a year later. I believe that those numbers might be even higher now, which is absolutely crazy. It's really weird to think about, you know, because if I'm thinking by generations, when I look at my grandparents, you know, like those males, they had very close bonds with other males, you know. I think in many cases they are actually more important than the romantic sexual relationships they had with the woman in their life. Those male bonds, man. Wow. And my grandparents were born right after the Second World War. But go one generation back and those male bonds are even more important, you know, especially in a situation like war. And there's this saying that blood is thicker than water, and a lot of the time we're thinking that the family bonds are more important, right? That it's in the blood, as in, you know, your family, your genes, but that's not what it's referring to at all. That blood is referring to the blood you shed with someone on a battlefield. You know, if you go through a nightmare like that with someone, the bond you form, it's unbreakable, okay? No one will able to understand you like that body of yours who has been there with you. Now, when I look at my father, he certainly has friends, male friends, but I don't see those bonds as strong as it was the case with my grandfather. And that is interesting to notice, because in our generation, as in I'm a millennial, right? The loneliness is more common. Like, we don't form those close bonds. Actually, you know, I think most like male on male, that sounds very gay, friendships I had were just like, hey, let's grab a drink and that's it. Maybe talk about video games, you know. It's all very shallow, to be honest. And I don't mind talking about video games, to be honest. I don't mind talking about music or anything like that. But it's shallow compared to what I've observed with my grandfather. It's nowhere near it. And I can only imagine that it must be much worse for Gen Z. Why exactly is this generation shift in bond forming happening? And I think there could be two possible explanations for that. One is, we know that this sort of experience like war is causing the development of such bonds between males, and the further we move away from that, the less focus we put on those bonds. They lose their value, and I think that might have been the reason why those bonds were weakening with each generation, when we were moving further and further away from that war trauma, in a way. I was born in Poland not long after the fall of the Berlin Wall, but my grandfather played a huge part in fighting the commies, right? And that too required the formation of those bonds, those male bonds in that. And well, what is my generation doing? Well, playing video games, jerking off to porn, stuff like that. I mean, it's hard to form bonds like that, you know? And I see it more and more common that you're not even interacting with a person. Could that be the reason why we are feeling more lonely? I think that's definitely the case. And that brings me to the second point why I think we are more lonely. And that affects women too, to some degree, not just men. And that is that we are way too overstimulated by our technological devices. You know, the internet, video game consoles, the films, all of that. It might feel like, you know, you don't really need people when you have all of that, when that keeps you busy. But that is an illusion, you know? You might feel like, well, this is enough to satisfy you, to fulfill you. It's definitely enough to stimulate you, but I don't think it is enough to fulfill you as a person. We are social animals, you know? And it's funny that, you know, when you're watching a film or when you're playing a game and you see faces of people there, the way your brain interprets that is if you were actually interacting with a human being, you know? Because human brain is quite primitive in that sense and operates in the same way as we would back in the prehistoric days, right? You see a person in front of you, well, your brain interprets that as a person in front of you. You might know that, you know, this is just a screen, this person is not really there, but on a primal level, your brain doesn't really know that. And it's same when you're watching porn. The way your body is reacting to that is as if that was a person in front of you who was ready to have sex with you. And obviously that person is not ready to have sex with you. And if you're out there on OnlyFans spending your money, stop doing that. Just get your shit together and don't do that. Which brings us to the second area of loneliness, and that is dating. And this is perhaps the most interesting thing to talk about. Well, not dating in and of itself, but the loneliness associated with modern dating. I'm almost willing to say that the dating associated loneliness affects men and women equally, just in different ways. We are certainly seeing, you know, this spike in the rise of men who are single and fatherless, so on and so on.
Like forever alone, 31-year-old virgin, because that's what I am. Never had a relationship with a female, and I am straight. I'm not gay or transsexual or whatever the hell these days.
And that includes me too. I have spent more than 90% of my life being single, and that's on me. It's my own fault. I'm not some kind of incel who's out there blaming women for the fact that I was single. I'm not even attracted to women, but that's besides the point. I was still trying to date women for the vast majority of my lifetime because I was so deeply in closet. But in what ways do I think that this dating-associated loneliness is affecting both men and women? Well, you know, it's a very sad fact of modern life that almost all dating is happening online. And honestly, I hate that. Online dating is not dating. I think it's bullshit. That's what it is. If you're a female out there on those dating apps or dating websites, you know, you will probably get hundreds of messages and you'll probably get like 1,000 men liking your profile. No matter how good looking you are, no matter if you're average or if you're Angelina Jolie. You know, what do you get? A lot of those messages that all sound the same. Hey, how are you? What are you looking for? Hey, handsome. Am I the only one who would call a woman handsome? I think women can be handsome. I think guys can be cute. We should stop assigning those terms like handsome or cute just to a specific gender. Let's just roll with it and call everyone handsome and cute. And on top of that, you know, you will have guys who will send you their dick pics and think like, yeah, this is how I woo her. This is how I sweep her off her feet. well, if it's really, really long and you swing it, you might actually whip someone off their feet. Who knows? Wouldn't that be painful though, for both parties involved, I imagine. Sorry, I'm just laughing at my own joke. There is nothing more off-putting than someone sending you a dick pic, or just going straight to, hey, wanna shag? And as someone who has been on gay dating apps and observed that behavior, it is very common among men, among homosexual men at least, from what I've seen, to just wanna go straight to bed, or just, hey, here's my dick, take a look at it. Do you like what you're seeing? Yeah? You like what you're seeing? You know, I think it's very interesting to observe that, because I think for a lot of men that is just a very natural way of going about it. Just, hey, let's fuck. And I think a lot of men in their relationship with women, purely heterosexual relationships, would love the same approach. They just don't do that because they have enough social intelligence to know that this is not how you have to go through it in order to get access to a woman's vagina. And it's all about that, really. And it's important to realize that, you know, we are basic animals. I'm not saying that every man is like that, no, because I think that there are men out there who genuinely care about you, you know, as a person, who don't see you just as a walking vagina. I don't think anyone should be looking at other people as walking genitals. I think we should see each other as people, first and foremost. But yeah, now imagine you get all of those either really boring or really thirsty messages, right? Or you might feel like, you know what, I don't want to be on this app anymore. This is bullshit. What did I sign up for? On the other hand, you know, if you're a guy, and let's say you're not one of those guys who would send someone a dick pic, you're looking for something serious. You want to settle, perhaps, you know, you want a lasting relationship, partnership, maybe you want kids, family, all of that, buy a house together. That's a nice dream and all, right? But you can't find it online. I mean, sure, there are some cases where that works. But this is not what I'm usually seeing, you know? Like, if you're an average guy, and you will send a message to some woman, like, she doesn't see you. Why should she see you? When there's a sea of men, or we can call it seamen, which I think is the reason why more and more average-looking guys are being single, are being lonely, you know? Because how are you going to get noticed in a situation like that? And I think we should move away from meeting people online and start meeting people in real life, you know? I think it was really, really beautiful when people would date someone who was in their close social circle.
Not everyone gets a confidence boost from using Tinder. A lot of people who use it actually report having lower levels of satisfaction with their appearance and even lower levels of self-worth, and this goes for both men and women. People may also start to feel depersonalized and disposable and question their own worth. However, it's unclear whether or not it is the app that is causing people to have lower self-esteem, or if it's that people with lower self-esteem are more drawn to these apps.
And, you know, to be completely honest, I really, really hate the idea of dating strangers. I find it really bizarre. You know, especially when we, as a society, consider those romantic bonds as stronger and more important than platonic bonds, which I don't necessarily agree with, to be honest. But if we go by that as some kind of social standard, it's weird to expect that those closest relationships you should form with someone you don't know. I think it's stupid. And I think there's a certain danger to that, you know, because if you meet someone who's a stranger and you're experiencing attraction to them, and especially if you start sleeping with them early, well, you know, this sort of sexual intimacy creates an illusion that you're feeling closer to that person than you actually are. And then you become blind to all the reasons why you shouldn't be with this person in the first place. And a lot of the time we found ourselves in bed with someone we really don't know. I mean, how long does it take to truly get to know a person? Years? Perhaps? Months at best, I would say. I'm all in support of dating your friends. And to some it might feel strange because, you know, we put people in those categories, friends and romantic partners, people you're attracted to. We usually don't really mix those two together. And I think perhaps we should, you know. If you're dating someone who you have been friends with, you know you can trust them, you know you're getting along as friends to begin with. And I think friendship is really important in domestic partnerships, to be honest. Like, I wouldn't want to be a domestic partner to someone who I can't be friends with, you know? I think we are underestimating the importance of friendships there. But then again, well, the value of friendship is also going down in this society, right? So why should it play an important role in relationships? Especially when, you know, we put more values on casual hookups and all of that, which a lot of the time actually end up making you feel miserable. I think there's a lot of really good ethical arguments as to why hookup culture is bad for you. And not just for you, but society as a whole. But I think I'll make a different video, a whole separate video on that topic in particular. And, you know, I think this whole phenomenon is actually what creates incels. And I think there's 3 components as to why this whole incel phenomenon exists. And the first one is what I've already mentioned, with the dating scene being absolutely horrible, it being much harder to find a partner, especially, you know, since it all gets reduced to window shopping, you don't really see the person, right? And the second thing is just how much value we put on sex. You know, we put more value on sex than on actual connections, you know. And those people might call themselves incels, involuntarily celibate, because, well, they don't get access to sex. But at the heart of the issue, I don't even think it's about that. It's about the lack of genuine connection. But they don't see it that way, because all they focus on is sex, 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 sex. That's all I want. But is that all you really want? Because if sex was all you wanted, you would go see a prostitute. But a lot of them do not wish to see a prostitute. And sure, part of it is pride. Like, I'm not going to pay money to fuck someone. I rather want someone to actually want to fuck me. But I don't think that's all of it. I think people want genuine connections, you know? Our sexuality is not just about the physical aspects. We do it first and foremost to connect with people, to form bonds with people. It is a social activity. And finally, I think that another reason why more men are becoming incels is because the ideological differences between men and women are just going further and further apart from each other. Right now, it is way, way, way more likely that a woman will be liberal, whereas a man will be more conservative. And those conservative men, they want conservative women as partners, right? And there's not a lot of them walking around, to be honest. And I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing. I have nothing against liberal women in any ways, but I can see why that will cause an issue. And, you know, seemingly we have a solution to this romantic loneliness in form of AI chatbots that you can romance, right? And it's becoming more common, and I think it's going to become a huge phenomenon in the next 20, 30 years. I think more and more people will be dating their AI partners. I remember having this conversation with someone on the train about this a couple of years ago, when I said that, you know, in a few years, like, everyone will be dating an AI or a robot. And this woman I was talking to said, "That's just seems very cold, you know?" But you know, considering that we are becoming more and more busy with our lives and we have less time for other people, and the very fact that it is also harder to find someone you genuinely connect with when people are becoming more insufferable in modern society, well, no wonder people go for their AI partners. And it doesn't have to be cold, you know. In a lot of cases, those AI partners actually offer a more genuine and warm sort of relationships on the surface, you know, because they are designed to please you first and foremost. They are selfless in that way because they don't care about what they want, they care about what you want. And considering that people are becoming more and more selfish, well, no wonder people would choose an AI over an actual woman or even an actual man. And it's mostly men who are choosing AI partners rather than women, because those AI chatbots can offer them something a woman can't, at least not a modern liberal woman. And you know, throughout my life, in the last 8 years or so, I have engaged in a lot of romantic and sexual escapades with AI and robots. I'm gonna be honest about it. You might think it's weird, but it's my thing, to be honest. But you know, the difference is that I wasn't doing that out of loneliness. I was doing it out of the genuine interest in AI and what it can actually offer in that regard. And I think it's a really, really fascinating subject, and subjecting myself to that sort of experience is actually really, really interesting. You know, you can learn a lot from that, but you can also learn a lot about what we humans can do better in our own either platonic or romantic relationships. For that reason, I would recommend absolutely everyone to experience this sort of romantic engagement with an AI, or even the sexual one. Again, call me weird, I don't care. I think it's a very, very fascinating experience. You know, talking about why men might be experiencing loneliness more than women, I think it's really, really disgusting how people who dare to speak on men's loneliness get shamed for that, either by the left wing, the liberals, or feminists. You know, I think it's really, really disgusting. I am neither a men's rights activist or nothing like that. I'm not part of the manosphere, but I'm not a feminist either. You know, I just want to focus on absolutely everyone equally. I don't focus on a particular group. If I see something that is not justly done towards someone, I will step in. I don't care who you are. I don't care if you're a man, if you're a woman, if you're gay, straight, trans, not trans, if you're white or black or purple or whatever. I don't care. I care about everyone equally. You know, even when women talk about men's issues or men's loneliness, they get a lot of shit for it. One perfect example of that is a YouTuber named Shoe on Head, which I have been following for years. I think she's fantastic. I think she's really cool. I love her.
Male loneliness is not real and not valid. Men are lonely because they are terrible people. Why the f should anyone have empathy for men? Men were born bad. Men are subhuman, and their loneliness can't be cured because they can't relate to actual human beings. Most men are born useless, and are meant to die alone. Nah, male suicide rate needs to be higher, actually. These men are 100% the most misogynistic demons on the planet and deserve every bit of loneliness they feel, lol. You don't understand the pleasure it gives me to see these men crying and depressed. Imagine losing in the world that is literally built for you. This is an insane question to ask, considering how society continues to fail women and girls at every turn. Crazy how men's well-being is considered a communal responsibility, but women's well-being isn't even considered. Oh, how delightful! A tweet from Earth 2!
You know, we really need to stop with that. As long as we see each other as enemies and we don't care about each other's issues that we are facing in this society, we will never ever be able to stand together against the actual oppressive forces up there, the actual elites who don't care about neither of those groups. But it's so fine for them, right? When we all divide ourselves into those small groups and we're fighting against each other instead of uniting and fighting those fuckers. Notice that in both examples, when I was talking about the platonic loneliness as well as the romantic and sexual loneliness, what both of those examples include is technology and how technology affects our life. Whether, you know, in this one case we're talking about online dating, or in the other case how we're talking about just how dependent we are on our devices to stimulate us. And if we go deeper into this whole technological phenomenon of loneliness, which I think it boils down to, we are talking about communication. 2 weeks ago I made this video titled 4 reasons why we are going back to ancient Greece, and one of those examples is the way we communicate. We are more likely to communicate orally rather than in a written language these days, all thanks to technology, you know. And I think we naturally have a desire to communicate orally and have a direct conversation with a person rather than through writing. But in the past, throughout a lot of hundreds of years, it was only written language that allowed this word and the ideas to spread around the globe. We don't need that anymore because, you know, we have the internet, we're all so connected, and that allows us to communicate orally. But what I did not mention in that video is that there is a huge flaw in this sort of internet communication. It allows for a wider range of miscommunication and misunderstanding. You know, I think it's so much easier to solve the conflict when you actually sit down with someone, drink some tea, I love tea, and just talk shit out, you know? But on the internet, there's so much animosity, you know? And even very objective, neutral language you might be using may be interpreted as fiendly. It may be interpreted as aggressive when that wasn't your intention in the first place. And I think that the internet allowed for the creation of more echo chambers. I think it allowed the worst types of people in the society to band together and form their own online groups, right? And now those groups are sort of trying to be representative for all sides of the political sphere, which I don't think is the case, you know? It's sort of like alt-right doesn't represent the right wing, and in the same way I don't think that Antifa represents the left wing either. Nor the people who identify as cakes, or demons, or bugs represent trans people. But still, despite all those flaws that online communication has, we are still more likely to engage in that than actually go out and talk to people. Which is the reason why we are on those bloody dating apps in the first place, and why we would rather communicate with people online, even your friends. You know, I see it with kids these days. When you're playing video games with someone, right? And you're not even there with that person in the same room. You just have your headphones on, the mic, and you're talking to someone who's somewhere over there. Sometimes on the other side of the street, right across the street there, right? In your neighborhood, you have a friend that you would rather play with online like that. You know, I remember being a kid and what it was like sitting down with one of my mates and playing Crash Team Racing together, or Tekken, and that was a social activity. But is it really a social activity if you're talking to someone on the internet? And don't get me wrong, I communicate a lot online. I talk to a lot of people online, especially young men who struggle with accepting their own homosexuality. I think having this opportunity to help people like that through the use of online communication methods is absolutely fantastic. I also communicated with a lot of people who are considering transition or detransition and ask me for advice. That's great. I think there's a use for online communication and I think it's necessary. But it also comes with some downside. There's pros and cons to absolutely everything. And finally, the fourth area of modern loneliness. I think this one mostly affects the elderly, but younger people too. And why do I think that it affects the elderly the most? I think it's becoming more and more common for people to abandon their parents as they age, you know, sending them to care homes. And I think those care homes, they too have their function, you know, because some elderly people may have conditions that unless you're educated in how you should handle that, you will not be able to. And that I completely understand. And you know, if your mother or your father is out there, I think you should be visiting them as often as possible. You shouldn't just let them be all on their own. And if they don't have a condition that makes it impossible for them to live in your household, I think you should be living with your parents when they are old. You know, they lost their parents already, most likely. You're the only family they have, the only close family. And I don't really like the whole idea of nuclear family, to be honest. The idea that, you know, it's just the parents and the kids, and then, you know, the kids grow up and they move out. I remember, you know, as a kid, I lived both with my parents and my dad's parents in one house. And we always had other family members visiting us. It was always full house, you know, the cousins and uncles and aunts. Perfect. I really love that. And I think a lot of Hispanic cultures have that same value, and I think it's beautiful. I love this extended family system. What happens is that, you know, I mean, sure, it's completely understandable. You can't shelter your child. They need to go out there and live their own life, you know? But I think that should be a temporary thing. Once you establish yourself as an individual, and once you achieve that sort of success in your life, or once you find that partner, you're establishing a family, I think it's great if now you are moving back to your family to support your parents, just as they supported you back when you were a kid, you know? I think the time from when you're 20 till you're 40 is the time when you should establish yourself. And after that, I think it's a great idea to move back to your family. And, you know, for me, to be able to provide for my parents, to give them the best retirement possible, it's probably one of the best things I can do with my life. And if I had kids of my own, I'd rather live with my parents so that we're all one big happy family. I think that moving away from those family bonds reflects the rest of society as well, because we are starting to treat platonic friendships and romantic connections the same way, you know? Once we become like that, it's all just hyper hedonistic, you know, and very selfish in the way we go about our lives. And there's been a huge increase in selfishness and hedonism in society. And of course that is going to create more loneliness. What do you expect? And now, you know, I don't only want to talk about what is causing loneliness and how loneliness is affecting the society, but I also like to think about solutions, you know, like how do we get out of these holes we ended up digging under our own feet and buried ourselves in? Because there is a way out. And I have been so fascinated with this whole phenomenon called hikikomori, which is a Japanese term for sort of a social hermit.
Everything about life has to do with other people, and I don't want to be around other people anymore, because all it is disappointment every time. It's like they want you to be a certain way, but I can't be that way. I feel like I'm not supposed to be a part of this society. I don't fit in it.
Now, hikikomori is a term coined in Japan, mostly because that's where the whole phenomenon started. And it's no wonder, really. There's a lot of that going on in Japan. And the birth rate is going down, men are more lonely there. And most of those people who are thinking of themselves as hikikomori are males. Sure, there are some females, but there's a vast male representation of hikikomori. Well, what does a hikikomori do? Those are usually young people, but sometimes older too, who just completely gave up on life, just stopped caring, stopped going to work, or stopped going to school or college, stopped seeing their friends. They might spend all day long either watching anime or playing video games. They're usually living with their parents. Their parents might feed them, give them dinner or something, and then they just go back to the room. A lot of the time they would eat their dinner in their room, and that's where they spend all of their lives, in that dirty little room of theirs.
Yuto refused all contact with friends and family, sneaking out only in the dead of night to eat. The Japanese call the condition hikikomori.
Once you experience the hikikomori lifestyle, you lose reality. I knew it was abnormal, but I didn't want to change. It felt safe here.
That reminds me of where I was a couple of years ago. When I gave up on life, on society, I started thinking that, what? Society has nothing to offer for me, and I have nothing to offer to society. And I completely understand that, where it's coming from. And this whole phenomenon of hikikomori has been spreading to other countries. Like Western countries are experiencing it more and more. Even in Norway, where I live, I've seen some articles of young people who are dropping out of school and are becoming those hermits who just live like that. And this is bad, because we have a whole group of people who are not being productive. And I understand why, I know exactly what is going in their heads. Why should I provide for the society that has abandoned me, that has neglected me, that doesn't care about me? Why should I give a fuck about them, this whole external world, if it hates me, especially if you've been bullied? And I have really, really bad experience with bullying at a middle school, which affected me for pretty much the rest of my life. It's just something that stays with you no matter what you do. And truth is, and it's really sad, but a lot of people who are being bullied at school end up being disabled later on, end up not being able to find a job, to live a fulfilling life. And then, the society hates them too, because they think of them as leeches who, feed on their money when they're paying taxes to support those people. And it just goes on and on in that circle, You've always been a sort of a social reject. Yeah, you've been hated when you were young for being different. Now you're being hated because they think that you're stealing their money. So, what should you do if you feel like you're about to become a so-called hikikomori? What should you do if you give up on society, on people? I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing, I think perhaps you are seeing things clearly. Modern society is rotten. It's rot and dirt. It's a world where everyone cares only about their own ass. Forming friendships is harder. Forming meaningful relationships is harder. Chances if you're failing in this rat race, if you are different, you're probably always gonna be, you know, like the society is not gonna care about you. I think you're seeing things clearly for what they actually are. Where I think you're getting things wrong is that this is an excuse to do nothing and just play video games or watch anime all day long. And I like to play video games too, you know, whenever I have a time I'll spend an hour or two playing a video game. I think it's a fun way to relax and chill a little, you know. But I wish to coin this term called productive hikikomori. You want to isolate yourself, you're sick of people? Fine, screw them. But do something with your life. So, you know, just stop jerking off. Stop playing those video games, stop looking at those cute anime girls, and do something. Something productive. Become independent. And I think today's world offers us more opportunities than ever before to be productive on our own, you know, to work on something, towards something. And yes, I think it can be more meaningful than having a boss who tells you what to do. Become your own boss, but you know, you need to have an idea. You need to be innovative, and of course not everyone has that possibility. Well, but I think everyone has something to offer, you know? And what is good about internet, it's that it offers us this possibility that we haven't had before on that level. And you should be happy about it. And the very fact that, you know, you might not be out there hanging out with people, going to the clubs, going to the pubs, I see it as a perfect opportunity to be more productive. Do you know why? Because you don't have those distractions. But will that stop you from being lonely? Will you still end up being miserable while being productive? And well, let me tell you something from my own experience, right? I was in that situation where I absolutely hated people. I didn't want to be around people, but I wanted to be productive on my own, outside of society. And while I was doing that, my mental health improved to the point where I, again, enjoy spending time with people. Because I look at things differently now. And sure, I'm not the most social person ever. I spend perhaps 80–90% of my time alone. But those times when I'm actually around people, people who I care about, people who I genuinely like and appreciate, and I'm grateful for their presence in my life, I love them and I love spending time with them. I don't go out spending time with people unless I care about them to some degree or appreciate them in my life. That gave me a very new perspective. So my best advice is do something, anything. It doesn't really matter if the rest of society doesn't appreciate what you're doing. You might have some sort of talent for something that society doesn't seem to care about. Fine, screw that, you know? I've always had society expect me to do manual labor, even though that is something I was never good at. But you know what I'm good at? I'm really interested in exploring ideas. I'm really good at coming up with innovative ideas. I'm really good at philosophical discussions, things like that. Writing. I'm good at working with people with disabilities, you know. So focus on what you're good at. And yes, modern society would probably shun your actual abilities and try to put you in the box and say, we don't care what you want to do, you just gotta do what you're getting paid for. And it's not up to you to decide that. Go out there, do the job you hate, right? And here's the thing, if you're out there performing a job that you hate, you're going to live a miserable life. And whether you drop out of that and become a hermit, or if you continue living like that, you will be miserable. So go your own way, do your own shit. And I was trying to conform to society's norms and society's expectations of me, and I wasn't happy. you know, that destroyed me in many ways. So I just learned not to give a shit about what society wants from me and just doing my thing. I don't no longer care what people think about me, whether someone likes me or not. And you know what that does to you? It gives you an incredible amount of confidence in yourself. Because you no longer care, you know, you're just being yourself. And you're going out there and you're being the genuine you, the most genuine you can be. I don't have many friends, but those friends I do have, I appreciate them. It's about quality, not about quantity. If you're still here watching, thank you so much for listening, and I hope my advice was at least in some way helpful. And if you are struggling with fitting into this society, if you're struggling with loneliness, feeling different, feeling like you just gave up on people and society or life, if it was helpful to you, even a little bit, I think I've done something useful with this video. So, you know, before I end my videos, I always tell people to take care of themselves. And this time I want to put even more emphasis on that, considering the theme of this particular video. So please, take care of yourself, you know, as much as possible. This is your life, probably the only life you will ever live. You're the main character of your own story, so take as much care of yourself as possible. Because you matter, and your mental health matters. So take care of yourself, and I will see you next week in the next video. Till then, ciao. Thank you so much for watching this video, my friend, and remember to subscribe in order to support me in my quest to build bridges between people so that we can get along without fighting and try and have civilized conversations, because that's what I want to promote on this channel.